sister Brianna. You came into this world before me, and from the very beginning, you became someone I looked up to. You were more than a sister, you were a piece of my heart, a part of my story that could never be replaced. Nothing can prepare someone for losing a sister, and some days it feels impossible to understand why. But I choose to remember you for the beautiful life you lived and not just the way it ended. I'll remember your smile that could brighten a room, your laugh that could lift heavy hearts, your strength, your love, and the memories we shared. Those are things no one could ever take away. As your little sister, I promise to keep your memory alive. I will speak your name with love and tell your story with honesty. I will honor you by living with strength, kindness, and courage. Even though I can't call you anymore, I hear your voice. I know that love don't end when life does. It lives in every memory, every lesson, every tear, and every smile that remind me of you.
A young woman is standing at a podium in front of an open casket, forcing herself to speak in complete sentences while her entire body is shaking. She's talking directly to her older sister, the one who came into this world first and became, in her words, someone she spent her whole life trying to live up to. She talks about a smile that could change the mood of an entire room, a laugh that could lift you out of a bad day without even trying, and how nothing in the world could have prepared her to lose a sister this way. She promises, right there in front of everyone, to keep saying her sister's name, to keep telling her story, so none of it gets forgotten. That sister was Brianna Johnson, the influencer known online as DreamDoll Bri. And she's standing at that podium because someone in a car, on an ordinary night out, decided her sister needed to die, and still, weeks later, has never been named. Before we go further, I need a moment of your attention, because this part of the story is heavier than most. This isn't about a break in the case. It's about what happens to a family, and honestly to all of us, when there isn't one. If stories like this matter to you, if you think grief deserves to be witnessed with care instead of consumed for entertainment, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and like this video before we continue. It helps this reach people who need to see it, and it tells families like this one that someone out here is paying attention because they care, not just because it's trending. So let's talk about what actually happened this week, because it matters, even without a new lead in the investigation. Brianna and AJ were laid to rest together in Pompano, Florida, in a joint memorial service for two cousins who, by every account, were raised more like siblings and extended family. The service was live-streamed, which is its own strange modern reality. Grief broadcast in real time to a following built entirely online, the same platforms that made Bri's name now carrying footage of her burial. During that stream, her mother could be seen breaking down at the casket, a moment that's since been clipped and reshared thousands of times, watched by people who feel connected to a young woman they only ever knew through a screen. There's something worth sitting with here before we go any further, because it says a lot about grief and about the strange position families find themselves in during cases like this one. When someone becomes known publicly, even at the modest scale of hundreds of thousands of followers, their death stops being private in the way it would be for almost anyone else. Their mother's most unguarded, devastating moment becomes public property, replayed and commented on by strangers, some offering genuine compassion, others simply consuming it as content the way they consume anything else on their feed. That tension between a family's right to grieve privately and a public's appetite to witness tragedy up close is one of the more uncomfortable dynamics running underneath this entire case. Let's talk about Brianna for a moment, because it's easy in a case like this to let the investigation swallow the person. She built something real in a short amount of time. Hundreds of thousands of people who followed her for her style, her humor, her energy, the version of herself she chose to share. She was known for a track called Bend Over that took off as a viral sound, the kind of moment that can change the direction of someone's entire online career almost overnight. She'd recently been accepted into a mentorship program run by one of the biggest names in streaming, a genuine step forward in a career she was clearly building with intention, not just posting for the sake of posting. People who knew her described her as someone who inspired others to be bold, to chase what they wanted without apologizing for it. That's not a small thing. A lot of people online perform confidence. By most accounts, she seemed to actually have it. And then there's AJ, the cousin buried beside her, whose story got far less attention in the immediate aftermath but matters just as much. His father came forward publicly in the days after his death, not to share memories, but to defend his son's character against rumors that had already started spreading, suggestions of gang ties or some criminal element that might explain why this happened. "I raised those kids," he said. "They weren't troublemakers." Think about what it takes for a grieving father to feel the need to say that within days of burying his child. It tells you the speculation was already moving faster than the facts, already reaching for an explanation that would make this tragedy feel less random, even if that explanation wasn't true. That's a pattern we want to focus on today, because it's one of the most consistently human responses to unsolved violence. When there's no confirmed motive, when police still have, in their own words, only limited information to work with, people don't sit comfortably in that uncertainty. Uncertainty is uncomfortable in a way that almost demands to be resolved, even artificially. So the public reaches for whatever narrative is closest at hand, whatever makes senseless violence feel like it makes some kind of sense. Sometimes that narrative blames a victim, suggesting they must have been involved in something to have been targeted this specifically. Sometimes it blames people close to the victim, based on nothing more than proximity and suspicion. Almost none of it is based on anything investigators have actually confirmed. It's just the mind's way of refusing to accept that sometimes terrible things happen to people who did nothing to deserve them. This is where the psychology of grief and the psychology of an unsolved case start to overlap in a really specific way. Grief on its own is hard enough, the kind of pain that reshapes a family's daily life in ways that don't heal on any predictable schedule. But grief without an answer, grief where you don't know who did this or why, carries an additional weight that complicated grief researchers have written about for decades. There's no arrest to give you a sense that the world responded appropriately to what happened. There's no trial to attend, no moment where someone is forced to account for what they took from you. Just an open case number and a family left to construct meaning out of an event that, as far as anyone official has said, still doesn't have one. And in that vacuum, something else tends to happen, something we touched on before but that deserves real attention here. Communities start investigating on their own. Social media becomes an unofficial task force, amateur theories treated with the same confidence to confirm police findings, screenshots, and rumors spreading faster than any actual update from Miramar police. We've been careful on this channel not to repeat specific unverified accusations against named individuals, because doing that risks hurting real people based on nothing more than suspicion and anger looking for somewhere to land. But it's worth naming the phenomenon itself, because it's happening in real time around this case. Grief has already curdled into public blame in multiple directions, people pointing at those who were close to Brianna and AJ that night, building narratives out of fragments because the official narrative hasn't arrived yet. That impulse is deeply human. It's also, in the absence of real evidence, deeply dangerous, capable of destroying an innocent person's life over nothing more than proximity to tragedy. Let's step back and look at where the actual facts leave us, because it's worth restating clearly what is and isn't known. Police still haven't released a motive. They haven't announced an arrest. They haven't confirmed a vehicle tag or a suspect description beyond the inconsistent reports of a dark pink or white sedan. What we do know is that Chief Delrich Moss has said clearly that his department believes this was a targeted attack, that the Lamborghini may have been followed to the location where the shooting happened, and that detectives are still working to understand why. Weeks later, that why remains the entire unsolved center of the story. There's something almost cruel about how this case sits right now, poised between two very different endings. If someone is eventually caught, all of this circulating speculation, all of this community turning on itself trying to fill in blanks, gets replaced by an actual answer, however painful that answer might be. But if no one is ever caught, if this becomes one of the cases that quietly fade from headlines while the family keeps living with the unanswered question every single day, then all that's left is exactly what we're watching now. A funeral, a live stream, a mother collapsing over a casket in front of an audience of strangers, and a case number that never closes. I want you to think about something as we wrap up here. What does it say about how we process tragedy now, that a private family's most painful moment becomes public content, viewed and reshared by people who never knew either the people in those caskets? Is there a way to genuinely honor someone's memory publicly without turning their death into entertainment? And where exactly is that line? And when there's no official answer to hold on to, is it human nature that pushes community toward blame and speculation? Or is there something we can actually do differently? as viewers, as an audience, to support a grieving family without adding to the noise around them. Let me know what you think in the comments, especially if you followed this case since the beginning. Do you think an arrest is still coming, or is this one destined to go cold? And if you want more of these deep dives into the psychology behind real cases as they unfold, subscribe to Psychology of Crime. So
what's up, y'all? Come with me and my cousin to
somebody
get my
out there
Chanel
knows what happened
bag.
on Sunshine Boulevard that morning. Until they come forward, this family waits, and so do we.